So super grateful that Chris can join us here. He has a terrific story, and we're going to listen to him. But just a more formal bio is in the books, but just to highlight, Chris grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. He went to West Point, got an MBA from Cambridge, worked with JP Morgan and then Chevron, but then went to the Department of Energy, where he grew through the ranks, and his last role was a Senate-confirmed position as Assistant Secretary of Fossil Energy. He has had a long connection with the oil and gas industry, but more specifically at DOE. He was also the federal representative to the National Commission on the BP Deepwater Horizon accident. And then since 2017, he has been with Cheniere in his current role, being responsible for policy, government affairs at Cheniere.
We're seeing a big challenge that our allies and trading partners across Europe are facing, and that's on multiple fronts. So, of course, when you have an actual armed conflict, there are many dimensions to the challenges that you face and the dangers that our colleagues in Europe will be facing. But a big part of that is energy security, how you think about supplying those economies, because as everybody in this room knows, energy is the lifeblood of every developed and developing economy. So a couple days ago, we saw Germany take the big step of saying that they're going to revoke the authorization for the Nord Stream pipeline, which is, as everybody here knows, is going to be a major supply of gas for Western Europe. We saw the European Commission just yesterday come out with the intention of releasing very soon a new plan that would dramatically reduce their reliance on Russian gas. I don't have any insights on what that's going to look like yet, so we'll see what plans they come out with. In the weeks running up to today, we've seen this. So I'm based in Washington, D.C. So we saw officials from the European Commission visiting Washington, D.C. to think about, what can we do to collaborate that will help us create more options for energy supply for our allies and trading partners throughout Europe. Over the last 5 years, the United States has gone from no LNG exports to being this year will be the largest LNG producer in the world. Cheniere is going to be the second largest LNG operator in the world, so this is a very dramatic change. It's a new way of thinking about the relationship between the United States and Europe and the United States and Asia, because LNG is that connective piece that connects operators turning the drill bit in the Marcellus and the Permian and the Barnett with customers throughout Europe, customers throughout Asia. And so how is the industry kind of reacting to this crisis that's going on in Europe right now? So if you looked at Cheniere's cargoes back in September of last year, about 30% of the cargoes that were produced by our company were going to Europe. So if you looked in December, that had gone from around 30% as prices moved up and as energy security concerns kind of increased. Went from 30% to around 60%, so doubled. So the number of cargoes going from the United States to Europe. Now that level's somewhere around 65%. So markets are responding, and a feature of LNG, part of the thing that makes LNG valuable, is that destination flexibility. That's part of the business model. So the limiting factor in being able to support economies throughout Asia is going to be probably regasification capacity. So unlike oil, when you see some sort of crisis of supply, there's a question of, well, can you produce a little bit more? Can you increase your production? Can we get more supply into markets? Supply for LNG is capped by the facilities that you build, right? Because you have to build these multi-billion-dollar LNG facilities that then take the methane, turn it to turn it to LNG so you can move to other markets. And then on the receiving side, you have to have a regasification terminal that then takes that LNG and turns it back into methane so you can push it into your distribution systems. So the limiting factor is probably going to be regasification capacity in Europe in terms of our ability to support economies throughout Europe if there is a precipitous decline in gas from Russia. And that kind of takes us to kind of the mid-scale conversation that we had with some of our colleagues from the European Commission in terms of kind of what happens next. So this, as we see this crisis unfolding, it's probably unfolding more rapidly and more dramatically than we expected a few weeks ago, although there were various scenarios about what might happen and what might occur. But as Europe deals with this, right, they're also trying to think about, well, what do they think in the medium term and the longer term about energy security? What do they think about medium term and the longer term around their challenges for climate, right? And how do they put these challenges together in a way that ensures that they don't have the wrong type of unintended consequences? So one of the things certainly that Europeans were thinking about is throughout Europe, infrastructure projects that would allow them to more efficiently move gas from region to region. There's a lot of regasification capacity in Spain that's not connected to the rest of the continent. You can't get from Spain to France, and there's a lot of reasons for that. That is something that will have to be addressed if they want to be able to use the existing regasification capacity effectively, so that it creates some options that are different from importing pipeline gas. There's also the question of how many regasification facilities need to be in place. So in times of calm, these tend to be underutilized, kind of overcapitalized facilities, but in times where you don't have periods of calm, certainly you wish that you had more of them. And how do you think about that risk premium now that we're trying to figure out how capital gets pushed into those various projects? And then lastly, like, how do you think about the value that you get out of energy security and reduced greenhouse gas emissions from different sources of gas? So again, in times of calm, when you have a pipeline in place, the economic way of getting a molecule from point A to point B is pretty much always going to be pushing it through that steel in the ground. And that's if you don't take into account, if you don't quantify the value around energy security and around reduced emissions. So as we're bullish on Europe. We think that the tie between the United States and Europe is going to be deep and sustained. We think this issue of energy security is going to be an important connection between our two markets. We think the value proposition of LNG from the United States to Europe has a lot of promise. It is beneficial here in the United States in terms of creating jobs, creating opportunities, but it's also really beneficial for our allies and trading partners throughout Europe. But as the Europeans think about the rules of the road, these are things that they're going to have to take into account. For us, the idea of reducing flaring and reducing fugitive methane emissions, it's an imperative for our business, because the thing that we sell, LNG, the value of that LNG, part of it is the issues of energy security, but the second issue is around transparency and around reduced greenhouse gas emissions. That product that's a result of all of the processes and all of the responsibility that operators employ here in the United States, and the regulatory scrutiny that we undergo, all of that leads to a product that's a lot more transparent than natural gas coming from other parts of the world. And so when you're buying natural gas from Cheniere, you're also buying the standards from all of the suppliers in the United States. You're buying the standards from all of the operators in the US. You're buying all the rules that are promulgated at the state level and by the EPA. And you're buying a transparency so that you understand the greenhouse gas footprint of the thing that you're buying, which is not the case otherwise.
So in terms of, if you look specifically at Europe, right, I mean, there's a significant chunk of gas that's coming in from Russia.
Yeah.
How much more share do you think US LNG can take? Yeah. And is that something that can happen quickly, or you think it's something that probably will take another few years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, right? So there's the long pole in the tent, again, is regasification capacity. Quantifying how much available regasification capacity is a tricky thing, because there are a lot of contractual features of that capacity that keep it from being used at 100%. In terms of if you own a slot somewhere, you have some right of refusal for that slot, and then you have to make it available with some period of time. And if you're not compelled to release it, with enough time for someone else to divert a cargo to that slot, then the slot is officially used, but it's not being used, right? So there's some things that could happen to make that more effective. If there was a precipitous decline in supply from Russia, which you haven't seen yet, so first of all, Gazprom is actually meeting all of its commitments right now. Now, the thing you are seeing is that in a normal market, you'd see a lot more gas coming across to take advantage of these $30 prices, and that's not happening, right? So the rules of economics are not driving behavior right now because there's so many other factors in place. But if there was some precipitous decline, LNG could replace 10 to 20% of that. It's not an instant solution.
Yeah.
And there's a limit to the amount of destination flexibility that you can put in place. So many of our customers are traders, Trafigura and Vitol and Shell, who have built into their business model destination flexibility. Our model is to commit all of our, a certain quantity of our volumes to end users, and then we're not a commodity business.
Yeah.
Like when prices go up and down, that's not our business. Our business is long-term energy security for our customers. But those customers that are traders who do have long-term contract with us, we sell to them and then they take it and they open and close those arbitrages. Those markets flip upside down for them sometimes, and then they blast wide open, right? So all of those volumes that can move are moving to Europe right now. But what we do see is it's putting upward pressure on prices in Asia, right? So it's impacting consumers around the world. But again, the thing I'll mention again that I emphasized a moment ago is that a customer who is actually taking gas right now in Europe and has a long-term SPA, sales purchase agreement with Cheniere, is not paying $30+ prices right now. They are paying Henry Hub. So that again, we'll see how this crisis unfolds. But that market reality is going to remain in place after this passage.
Do you see an actual change in the way natural gas and LNG is being perceived?
I mean, I think so to an extent, right? I think the challenges around climate have become more immediate and more pressing. And so that's a factor that we have to deal with, right? So, one thing I can say about Cheniere is throughout the Obama administration, throughout the Trump administration, into the Biden administration, we've had one approach to these issues. And you've seen the winds change and some of the rhetoric change, but the business fundamentals don't change. And the data that we're getting around the imperative to act isn't changing. It's constant, right? So we think that these business cycles and the data cycles are going to be much longer than the political cycles. And so a benefit for me is I don't have to remember where I am in space and time for how my talking points about how I talk about things, because it's always the same. We permitted, Cheniere permitted during the Obama administration. Cheniere built and commissioned during the Trump administration. Cheniere is expanding during the Biden administration. And our points have always been the same. One of the reasons why you start with fugitive methane emissions is that there's some benefit in doing it, right? It costs something. But then the stuff that you sell, we would love all that stuff that's emitted to get piped to our terminals so we could sell it, right? So that's a good place to start. It's a little easier. Does it cost something? Yeah, it will cost something. And here's what we're trying to do around QMRV, right? So if the government just comes out and says, well, we want you to have an X% reduction by this time and place, and there's not an understanding of what X% means or what it costs, then how do you set X, right? You just pull it out of your ear. So what we're trying to do through our QMRV project, quantify, monitor, report, verify, where we're comparing all these different technologies, trying to understand what they cost and see how well they work, is to go to government and say, well, if you have this aspiration, this is what it costs, based on our understanding of all these technologies right now. Now, we don't want government to go in and lock in anything that is too prescriptive, because then you kill all the innovation that comes through engagements like this. You want industry to come up with the solutions that work the best. But when you're trying to figure out where are we going to set our sights, if you don't have some basis for doing that, if you don't have some understanding of cost, then your initiative is not going to. You're going to have all sorts of unintended consequences that you haven't thought through. Because the art of regulating well is understanding the link between the thing that you do and the response that capital is going to make. And if you don't understand that well, then it's very hard to think about what is a prudent rule, because you don't have so that engagement between government and industry is something that is sometimes lacking. It's sometimes less fulsome, and that's one thing I sort of worry about a little bit.
Yeah.
Every year we've had more and more cooperation from the upstream, to the extent that even some groups, some companies that were a little scratchy about participating, they participate and they also want to know, well, hey, how are we doing, right? Because again, this is the direction of things. Everybody has the same pressures.
Yeah.
Everybody's got the same shareholder resolutions if you're a public company. Everybody's working with the same issues with financing and banks and the regulators. So these pressures are here whether you like it or not. And we're seeing more uptake, to the point that I mentioned we're doing this QMRV, Quantify, Monitor, Report, Verify, where we've got 5 operators that we're working with to field a number of technologies. And this wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, but now we've picked these 5 operators, we're working with them, and we get complaints about, like, how come you didn't pick us, right? Which is not what we were getting a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's an understanding that this is an important issue. It's not going to go away. We can wring our hands about it or fight it, right? But I think the way that you build the economy of the future is you shape it, and you shape it through data and evidence, and you do it in a transparent way. So you make your case. And when you look at, particularly for natural gas, when you look at the global carbon budget in a 1.5 degree world or a 2 degree world, there is a space for natural gas.
Oh yeah.
The transition path is really, really hard.
Yeah.
There's not a one trick solution. It's not all wind. It's not all solar. It's not we're going to build a bunch of nuclear plants. It's not we're turn everything into CCS. All of those will fail, right? You're going to have pieces of everything, and natural gas is going to be an important base load for areas in which you're integrating wind and solar, and you need that base load of gas. Now, not all gas will make it, right? I mean, there'll be some that get pushed out. So our strategy is to make sure that we know there's a role for what we do. And we want to make sure that we are the company that's doing that, and we're working with our suppliers to make sure that they are part of us and that we're part of that solution. So that's been our approach. So the instruction I got was to measure twice, cut once, take incremental steps, don't put your foot in it, take a data-based approach, work with your colleagues in the industry. And it's a painful, slow slog, right? Because if you just run out of the gates and you start making a bunch of declarations, then the whole thing blows up on you and you don't go anywhere, right? So it's been a combination of that incremental approach, and then also hiring smart, impatient people who kind of see where the finish line is, and that's what I really get with Fiji, who's like just a crazy person, right? And he knows this space very well, and he's been able to really push us in a way that has ensured that I'm kind of the brake and he's the engine, and between the two of us, we kind of make a path forward. But one thing I can say, right, because there's been a noisy debate around prices, right? Because if you look back pre-shale gas and you saw the levels of volatility that we had in natural gas prices and the level of prices themselves and the way that they bounced around, we are in a new era of stability in terms of gas levels and volatility. And there's a chart I actually like to show when I do show slides, right? That shows, here's what prices look like pre-shale gas. Here's what they look like after shale gas, but prior to LNG, lower volatility, lower price levels. And that's the period in which the Department of Energy was trying to go through these public interest determinations of saying, well, should we export LNG? Because you had a very, very noisy set of arguments made around keep that gas in the United States, American manufacturing back, we want low prices. Japanese are paying $14 for gas, we're paying 4. So why are you going to link our prices back to their prices? And we do all the modeling. We said that is not going to happen. Like you don't. This commodity does not have the same fungibility as oil, and you don't link it. You can't close that arbitrage just when it opens up, like you can with oil, right? So we're not going to link our prices back to Japan just by doing LNG. So we did that through studies when I was at the Department of Energy. And now when I get that same question now, like I don't go back study, I just go and look at how things are right now. So right now, prices in Europe, 30s, prices in the US, around 4, right? Between 4 and 5 or wherever they are right now in Europe. They don't link, right? You can see it with your eyeballs now, right? So you do need a certain level, so drillers keep drilling. And then when it gets, so one of the challenges that the Biden administration sees right now is that there's some angst around gasoline prices and around natural gas prices as natural gas prices spiked up and then they came down, right? And you get letters from members of Congress saying stop LNG, no more LNG. So that's actually unuseful for the goal of reducing price volatility and price level, because if you go to drillers and say, I want you to drill more, and I'm going to take this big block of really stable demand and pull it away from you, now go drill more, you actually get the opposite of what you want, right? You get more volatility, you get more hesitance, because a lot of drillers who responded to previous spikes in prices by deploying a lot of rigs had that production come online right as prices crashed again, and they all got punched in the nose. So, I'm preaching the choir with you guys, right? This is your life, and that you got to be careful about the rate at which you grow, because if you chase every price spike, by the time your production comes online, if you push too much volume into the market, then you're gonna create a price that upon which you based your previous investment discussions. So overall, we like lower price volatility because we like our suppliers to have nice, stable business models so that we reduce price volatility so we can tell our customers, hey, you don't like being linked to this oil roller coaster. You would rather be linked to a nice, stable Henry Hub price